intake number 3 of the season. I am unfortunately very suspicious that he is suffering from something called hydrocephalus. Now, if you've followed me for a while, that probably rings a bell because I have one of these cases, if not yearly, at least every other year. They're always heartbreaking cases. I'll touch on that in a minute. But if you are not familiar with hydrocephalus, or maybe you've heard of it in people even, hydrocephalus is basically a buildup of excess fluid on the brain. There's a lot of pressure involved with it, so there's also a lot of neurological signs that are associated with hydrocephalus. Oftentimes an animal or a person with hydrocephalus has like a very obviously almost deformed, protruding head up here, extra rounded. Like if you're interested, you can just Google it and you'll see lots of different images. Sometimes it's really in your face obvious. Other times, like with this kit that I got in, you guys probably wouldn't have been able to tell that physically it's drastically different than any other baby fox. Because I've dealt with dozens and dozens of foxes, immediately picked up that I'm like, something doesn't look quite right. But that is not the reason alone that I think this fox is suffering from hydrocephalus. I've been rescuing foxes, specializing in them for about 13 years now, and I know there's like a very specific behavior and mentation that happens when an animal has hydrocephalus. And all of them have the same finder story. All of them have no fear of humans. They run right up to people. And granted, I can't tell you with 100% certainty that this is what it is. Because, well, first of all, the only way to actually technically diagnose it is imaging of the brain or during a post-mortem necropsy, which means once an animal passes away, they can look at the brain and they might be able to see the excess fluid that way. The reason that hydrocephalus cases tend to be super heartbreaking, especially in a wildlife rehab setting, is because there's no easy fix for it. It doesn't just go away on its own. You can manage it with steroids, for example, to try and reduce the swelling and the pressure, essentially, but it's not a long-term fix. The only true long-term fix, which still doesn't even give an animal like the full lifespan they'd naturally have, but it helps, is to do this neurosurgery that basically they put a shunt in the brain and it drains that excess fluid into a different part of the body. Now, the problem, and again, you can look this up if you're interested, this just isn't really done on wildlife. It's done sometimes on domestic breeds if owners want to pay for it, like Chihuahuas and Bulldogs. I feel like you see it kind of frequently. I mean, not all the time, but you see it in them. You can easily find literature on that online. I have asked a few vets over the years why we can't have this surgery done. They give me different answers, but they have their own reasons, and most of it comes down to the fact that they either don't want to use their equipment on wildlife for sanitation purposes, or they just don't really think it's worth the resources to do this for a wild animal, or they probably don't think that it's feasible for rehabbers to be able to have this surgery done. So I've always just been told no. This is the reason these cases are so heartbreaking, because like I said, they are all naturally very friendly foxes, very sweet. They usually excessively vocalize, and then once they feel that somebody's there, they don't care if it's another fox you put them with or if it's you, a human caretaker. Once they like feel the presence of somebody being there with them, because they're not, my theory, they're not like totally with the program, and so they're kind of scared and confused, and when they feel somebody with them, they are almost like instantly comforted and quiet down. So they tug at your heartstrings. So all of this behavior is spot on with this fox kit that I took in. I can't be 100% certain though. There's a variety of other things that this could be, anything from neurological viruses to blood parasites to congenital issues that might have similar symptoms. But after rescuing foxes for 13 years, I am highly suspicious of this. And quite honestly, the seasoned rehabbers who I know that can recognize this will usually euthanize these animals immediately upon intake, because we know how this usually ends. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, whatever way you want to look at it, I'm not there yet. I don't have the heart to do it. I lean more on the side of, if you're comfortable and you're happy, I'm going to keep you going for as long as I can until I notice that this condition is really bothering you. But if you do it my way, you're walking a fine line, I'll be honest, because if you are not completely in tune with subtle cues and you don't have the intuition to know when something has crossed the line, it's bad, because it will progress very rapidly and it will turn into worse neurological symptoms and it will turn into seizures fast. So I will say that intake 3 comes at very ironic timing, because 3 or 4 days ago, literally, I was just talking to a friend of mine saying, I haven't asked a vet in probably 3 or 4 years if they do it for me. So the next time that I get a fox kit in who I'm highly suspicious has hydrocephalus, I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask around. I mean, maybe even to neighboring states and see if anybody would be willing to perform this neurosurgery for me. Because 1, I know that if this surgery looked like it was a viable option for us, you guys, our followers, would be able to raise the funds for it. 2, because they'd be deemed non-releasable after the surgery, of course. I know that we'd be able to give them a good life in captivity, because here's the key too, there's a difference between just keeping an animal alive and being able to provide a quality life in captivity. So I'm going to ask around, because what's the worst that they can say? No, again. And it's Sunday. There's nothing I can do about my suspicions at this exact moment. So I'm just going to focus on some of the other immediate issues at hand. I'm going to stay hopeful because I'm rooting for this little guy.